Welcome to the ultimate starter guide for Wasteland 3. I got a week's early access to the game before it came out, so in this video we can go over the best character builds, quirks, background choices, attributes for the weapon you're using, and what are the most useful skills to pick, because my god, this is a proper roleplay game that was made by Fargo, the same person who actually created the original Fallout, and it's lived up to every expectation for me. So this is going to be a long, in-depth video, but I recommend watching it all before you start playing, especially the skill section. I've timestamped everything in the video in the description below to make your life easier, so favourite it, subscribe if you want to come back, and use this video as a resource. And give the video a like if you find it helpful. But first, my friends, we have a word from today's sponsors, Displates, who are helping me decorate my office over here. As you can see, they create metal pieces of artwork that you can really easily just put on your wall. It basically works off a magnetic system, so you can just remove them from the wall, and there's a protective sort of sticker there that protects your wall or paint, and then you have a magnet on top, and then you can just put the display itself onto that magnet and it just stays there. So if you ever want to like change your art around or swap things over because you have like a different preference, you can just swap them around, and that's why I really like them. Displate are having a huge sale right now until the 30th of August. If you buy 1 or 2 Displates, you get 20% off. If you buy 3 or 4, you get 30% off. And if you buy 5 or more, you get 37% off everything. Check out the link in the description because there's tons of gaming artwork on Displate that will suit your style. Now at the start of the game, you'll have the choice to choose either a pre-created duo of characters that are all voice acted with their own voice lines that are quite funny to listen to, or what we'll be doing is creating our own custom characters. Now, one thing you should know before you jump into this game is you get to create 2 characters at the start of the game that you can customize yourself, and then as soon as you finish the prologue, you get to make another 2 characters. So essentially you can have 4 characters in your party that you've designed yourself, and then as you play the game you'll be hiring another 2 characters that are pre-made, but you can level them up and build them in a certain way that you want to as you play the game. So essentially we're going to be making a 4-person party that pretty much has everything covered so you can experience the game fully. So we'll be going over everything in this video, but what I recommend before you start building your own character is having a look at the different quirks. Now you can choose to have no quirk, but in my opinion, you're going to want to pick a quirk because they're really powerful. Now quirks give you a unique bonus to your character, however they come at a big expense. So for example, the quirk Death Wish gives you +3 action points overall, and action points define how many times you can move, shoot and do anything during the turn-based combat system. However, even though we get +3 action points, it's at the expense of not being able to wear armor of any kind, which is a huge loss in my opinion, and I wouldn't pick this perk simply because there's lots of armor in the game that can even give you more action points, give you skill boosts, so that is such a big trade-off that I wouldn't choose it. So what are the best quirks that you should build a character around? Let's go over that very quickly. Firstly, we have the serial killer perk, which was nerfed quite a bit from the beta. Now, every time you get a kill during combat, you will get +3 action points to use. So essentially, if you get a kill, you then get more action points to make another kill. However, the trade-off is you get -1 action points. But this is still a very good quirk because essentially if you build a character who has a lot of action points to begin with and you base him around getting kills in the first place, he's going to be getting +3 action points every turn to then get multiple kills with. Another great perk is the Medical Marvel. Basically, this gives you +5 health per level. So especially later on in the game as you level up your characters, having +5 health per level is going to make you a ridiculous tanky sponge for damage. The disadvantage being you cannot be revived during combat. Now in my personal playthrough, I have a melee character, one melee character in the group who usually runs forward and deals a lot of damage and is very tanky with the best armor, and he literally never goes down at all. And if he does go down, he's too far into enemy territory for me to really revive him anyway, so we just revive him at the end of the fight. And that works really well. So Medical Marvel is great for a tanky melee character for sure, who's going to be taking a lot of damage even, just because he turns into a damage sponge. Then we have the Mime. Now this actually changes the appearance of your character, which is quite funny. Now if you want one sneaky character in your party, this is the best thing to choose, because it increases the detection time to +2 seconds, at the cost of having just -10 health, which is not really that much when you start to level up, and then a throwing range of -0.5 meters, which again isn't going to be much of an issue for you. Now to give you an idea, the sneaky skill gives you +0.3 seconds detection time per point. So at max rank, you get +3 detection time. But that will require 28 skill points in total to max out. So in comparison, choosing the Mime perk literally gives you a maxed out sneaky character without any sneak investment at all. However, you will have some skill checks, so you're still going to want to invest into the sneak skill anyway, but you know, this is just such a great quirk for a sneaky character. It's overpowered. Next up, we have Poindexter. This is incredible. So what Poindexter does is it gives you +1 bonus skill point every 2 level ups, at the cost of -8 health and -3 health gain per level, which makes him a little bit weaker, yes, but I essentially have one character in my group who has so many skill points that he's just skilled into everything and he can sort everything out for the team if there's any skill checks to pass. He already has the skill point beyond his level in order to deal with it. Next up, we have Prospector. Occasionally discover valuable gold nuggets while digging, at the cost of -1 quick slot, which to be honest isn't really too much of a big deal. You can get armor that gives you +1 quick slot, so you can kind of even that out. Now, what exactly will you be finding? Well, you can get gold nuggets, which are worth about $500, and that's a lot of in-game money, considering at the start of the game you usually get between $100 or $200 per quest. And then you can also get a gold bar, which is worth $2,500, and that just means you're literally set for a long time if you get one of those. And it's very much possible to find as well. It's based off your luck skill, I believe, somewhat, so if you get this, also invest into the luck skill on that character too. Next we have Pyromaniac. 15% chance to catch fire when using explosives, but your fire damage is increased by 25% and your explosive damage is increased by 25%. Now this also applies to catching fire when using a flamethrower as well, so you can't get around it at all by doing that. Now personally, I have a character who is a sniper and he has the Pseudomonist perk. I think that's how you pronounce it. This makes you receive 33% extra damage whenever you get hit. However, you do 33% more melee damage and range damage. So my sniper sits way at the back, they're never targeted, they're always in range because the sniper range is ridiculously long, and they just do 33% extra damage on their weapon that already hits really hard, and they pretty much always one-hit kill everything they shoot at. So it's super powerful. And then another one that's worth a mention is the Waste Roamer. Now I don't use this, but it is pretty damn amazing considering it gives you 100% resistance to bleeding, poison, shocked, burning, frozen, at the cost of a -15% experience gain, which is pretty huge as a downside, but the benefits you get of being immune to anything are really nice. However, to be honest, as much as I've played, probably like 10 or so hours into the game so far, this hasn't really come up as being a major thing that's useful. So those are the big mentions in terms of really good perks that you're going to want to be looking at. The other thing you'll find in the identification section is your background. Now, the default background is that you're a bookworm, which is one of the best backgrounds in the game because it gives you a +5% experience boost. Now, leveling up in the game is actually quite important because you get more skills, attributes, and it just makes the game much easier to play, especially if you're leveling up faster than the content you're exploring. More on that in a moment. So, what are the best backgrounds? Obviously Bookworm. There are definitely bad ones though. Desert Cat gives you +1 perception. This is something you can just get with skill points and leveling anyway, so it's much better in the long term to just have 5% experience boost, for example. Disciple of the Metal. This gives you plus 15% fire damage. Great if you just want to have one guy with a flamethrower. However, I don't think it's that amazing. Instead, Explodomaniac gives you plus 15% damage with explosives. So every time you fire a rocket, you're just going to decimate whatever you hit. Goat Killer gives us a plus 5% crit chance. Great for a gunslinger. Grease Monkey is also really good. Plus 10% damage to robots and vehicles, so you'll just be absolutely destroying them. However, if you're firing explosives at vehicles to do damage, Explodomaniac is still going to be a better choice. Lethal Weapon, plus 10% melee damage, self-explanatory. Mopey Poet, plus 5% evasion. I kind of wanted to build a character around evasion. I've not done it yet, but it's a fun thing to think about. Raider Hater gives you plus 10% damage against humans, which are the most common enemy. However, you also have synths, robots, and lots of other things, so it kind of bottlenecks you into being specifically good against attacking that type of thing. And then another really good one is Vicious Avenger, gives you plus 2 penetration. Now, penetration is how much of the enemy's armor you ignore, so if you have that on a pistol wielder or a light machine gun user, then that's going to give them needed penetration to actually deal damage to those armored foes. So now let's take a look over all of our attributes and what they do and what the best thing is. Now, if you guys want to follow my playthrough, I will link it down below in the description. It starts tomorrow, is the first episode, and then we're going to do daily episodes of Wastelands 3. And you'll see how I build my characters there, so I recommend checking that out too. But just so you understand how it works, coordination starting out is a very important stat because it dictates how many action points you have. For every 2 points of coordination, you get another action point, as you can see. So you always want to invest in coordination in pots of 2. At the start of the game, I started one of my characters with 8 coordination and they were just killing everything. It was incredible. They were getting tons of experience as well. However, never max out any of your attributes. Ever, pretty much. Apart from maybe charisma, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Because you can actually find secret hidden dolls in the game that give your whole party a +1 benefit permanently to that attribute, and you can also find equipment and gear that gives you +1 as well. But at the start of the game, if you're using like a pistol or something, you can get away with 2 coordination. However, I would usually put most of my characters around 4 coordination so they can still, play the game and do a lot in the game as well. Even my sniper at 4 coordination means they can move and then take 1 shot each turn, which is kind of what you want. And then as you play the game and level up, most characters are probably going to end up around 8 coordination, which means they can make multiple moves in the game. The next thing we want to talk about is luck. Luck is a really interesting stat. As you can see, luck dictates how much penetration you have, so how much of the enemy's armor you ignore. Every 2 points of luck give you another +1 point to your penetration stat. So one thing you'll have a look at the bottom here is it also dictates your lucky action chance, so you getting the ability to move again, lucky crit chance, lucky mega crit chance, which is just a 1-hit kill essentially usually. Lucky evade chance, so you just dodge a bullet randomly. 20% at max is incredible. Lucky crit resistance, double healing chance, double money chance, and scrap chance. Now, double money chance is really interesting because you're going to want your lucky character also having a high lockpick skill so they can loot all those containers and get a better chance of good loot. Any weapons that you can fire multiple times or hit multiple people with are going to benefit from luck. Specifically pistol users, and actually my sniper is quite lucky and that's paid off a lot of times for me too. Next we have awareness. Now awareness is your chance to hit things. So the higher awareness you have, the easier it is to hit things. It also gives you a ranged damage bonus as well. And also your perception, which is your ability to see things that you otherwise can't see that are around you. Like landmines, which is really important to have one character like your sniper with a high awareness skill. So for assault rifles, pistol users, anything ranged, awareness is really important. For melee users, it's actually okay to have it quite low. It does affect their hit chance slightly, but it's so minuscule that if you just invest in the melee skill itself, you won't need to worry about it too much. Next we have strength. Now this is the amount of health your character has, as well as their melee damage, their throwing range, and their health per level. So obviously, if you don't want your characters to die, you're going to have to invest in their strength skill. There's also some armor in the game that has a strength requirement as well, and especially heavy weapons have a higher strength requirement so you can carry them around and whatnot. So if you're going for big guns, you're going to want at least 4 strength. If you're going for a melee build, I recommend actually going pretty high just for that extra 24% melee damage and the additional health and health per level. Now personally, I did put my sniper at the start of the game at 1 strength. However, I found if someone accidentally shot them or they got hit by an explosion or something, they'd immediately die. So usually I'd recommend having a minimum of 2 strength, especially on harder difficulties, just so they don't immediately get one hit killed every single fight. Next up, we have speed. Now speed is kind of an interesting one because it dictates how far you can move for how many action points. And it also dictates your evasion and your initiative. So if a melee character has a high speed, then they can obviously move really quickly across the map and still have action points left over for hitting the enemy. So it's quite important, but you can invest on it later in the game for sure. I actually left my sniper and heavy weapons with a very low speed stat because they can just move into position at the start of the battle, take 1 shot, and then just sit there for the rest of the game, making minor movements where they can. But usually, they don't need to be moving up ahead like a pistol wielder might with its shorter range. Now, speed will also govern your evasion, so at a high speed skill, you can have a 33% evasion chance and plus 45% initiative. Initiative is who gets to fight first, basically. So it's not too important, but it is helpful. So eventually on your melee characters, you're going to want high speed. Everyone else can stay pretty much average. My heavy weapons user is still at like 1 or 2 speed, and he doesn't really have any issues at all. In fact, there's a perk that helps you with that in the heavy weapon skill tree. Next up, we have intelligence. Intelligence in Wastelands actually affects your chance of critical hitting and also the critical damage you deal as well. It also affects your critical heal chance and your heal bonus. So what I did in my playthrough is that I had one character with a high intelligence who was my healer, and he also used pistols and he'd be critical hitting people as well. Another thing you're going to want to invest in with the intelligence is, especially later in the game, your sniper. As you get better snipers, you're going to do more critical damage, considering the sniper does more damage. So essentially, you're going to want a high intelligence skill so you have a really high natural critical hit chance and you do high critical damage when you do hit them. So snipers and healers need a high intelligence skill. The other thing intelligence does is it gives you 1 skill point every 2 intelligence. Now that's only at the start of the game, or obviously later on in the game. If I start with 1 intelligence and then I put 2 in, I'll also gain another skill point as well. It's not something that I would be investing in specifically for the skill points though. You won't really miss that. Next up, we have charisma. Now charisma is another interesting one because it affects your strike rate. Now, strike rate, every time you shoot at an enemy in the game, you will get a point towards your strike chance, which is you'll fill up a little bar, and when that bar's maxed out, you'll get like a special ability, so you'll be able to target a specific point on the enemy, like their head, shoulders, legs, or cripple them, or do extra damage if it's a headshot, and so on. So if you have like a pistol user with a high charisma, they're going to be doing a lot more sort of headshots and trick shots and stuff like that. However, it's not that important that you want to invest in charisma specifically for that skill. What is important with charisma, and what I've done, is I have one character who has a maxed out charisma skill, and they have a huge leadership range, plus 22 meters, and a huge experience bonus of plus 30%, which means they level up stupidly fast. It's also the same character with the Point Dexter perk, which means they also get tons of extra skill points when they level up. Alternatively, if you only have 9 charisma, your experience bonus drops down to only 18%. So actually having maxed out charisma gives you another 12% extra experience bonus. So in terms of things to max out early on, charisma is very good to have maxed out on your leader immediately, because they're going to be getting tons of benefits from that extra experience. However, for pretty much every other person, I'd usually leave it at 2 charisma, if not 1 charisma, and then I would give them the bookworm perk for the plus 5% experience, or there's other items you can get in the game that gives you experience boosts as well. So charisma affects the leadership skill. So as you can see, as you increase your leadership skill, you get a increased chance to hit for nearby allies. And again, you also get a bonus to nearby allies. If you kill a boss, you get a multi-kill, or you revive someone. That doesn't come into play that much more often, but essentially if you have maxed out leadership on one character with a high charisma skill, then everyone around him is going to get a plus 10% hit chance, which is huge. With that said, you can have a squad without a leader. It's not that important, but in my opinion, if you have one guy with a high charisma skill who has loads of skills from the level ups, you're going to want a high leadership skill as well, just to take full advantage of it. So the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the skills, and I'll talk about how you want to build your character's attributes around those skills based on what weapons you're using as well. Now, before I say anything about weapons and what weapon to choose and so on, I would recommend having one of each character using a different weapon. For example, have one guy using big guns because the ammo is so expensive. Same with explosives. If you have like 2 or 3 people in the party using big guns, then you're not going to be able to afford enough ammo to actually shoot in the game. So you're going to be running around like punching people instead. So what my party is set up with is 2 pistol users because they don't use a lot of ammo and it's cheap, 1 automatic assault rifle, 1 melee combat, and then a sniper rifle as well. So we kind of got all our bases covered. We also sometimes use energy weapons too, which are very effective because they ignore enemies' armor. So initially, any skill that you invest in, the first 3 skill points only are 1 point each. The next ones cost 2 points each, all the way up to here. And then you're going to be paying 3 points each. And then once you get to 8 skill points, you're going to invest another 5 skill points to get to 9. And then once you get to 9, you're going to need to invest 6 skill points for the maximum maxed out skill points. So in total, to max out something is 28 skill points. So assuming like max level is 50, that's a lot of skill points to be investing in one thing. So that said, never max anything out, because there are actually armor, equipment, skill books in the game that gives you +1 skill point. So if you find a skill book, save it until you get to, level 9, and then use the skill point, and then you'll be at level 10. There's also armor in the game as well, like boxing gloves or certain pieces of helmets that will give you +1 to like your mechanic skill or your automatic weapons and so on. So always go up to like level 9, but never max it out, because you can max it out with armor and skill points. So that's the way to efficiently do it. And then you save yourself like an additional 6 skill points to invest in another skill. Now, automatic weapons are submachine guns and assault rifles. Submachine guns cost less 8 action points to fire, but they have a shorter range, while assault rifles have more penetration and extra range, and also different perks sort of attached to them. But if you have a look here, what you'll notice is that the higher my automatic weapon ability is, the higher hit chance I have with that weapon. But it doesn't actually increase my damage with the weapon, which is why awareness is also very important as an attribute when you're using any ranged weapons in general. If you're ever confused, by the way, it also says down here that recommended attributes: coordination, so you can shoot more and move more; awareness, so you have hit chance; speed as well, which I would kind of disagree with. Speed is kind of useful, but assault rifles have a longer range, so unless you're specifically using submachine guns, which I wouldn't, I think assault rifles are much better, speed isn't that important. I'd more put those points into awareness and coordination and just sack off maybe 1 or 2 speed instead. And then if you disagree with me when you play the game, just level it up slowly instead. Now, as you level up, you're also going to see down at the bottom, we have different perks we're going to be unlocking. Don't worry too much about these perks starting off. I can make a whole separate video about the best perks. Let me know in the comment section if you want to see that. But for now, we're just talking about general character builds. And as you level up, you'll naturally look at those perks and see which one is going to benefit you the most. Next up, we have big guns though. And again, with big guns, awareness is important. Coordination is very important. So my big gun character has 8 coordination at the start of the game, so he can just carry on mowing everyone down. However, the ammunition for big guns, especially explosives and even light machine guns as well, is very expensive. So every time you fire, you're going to be spending $1 for those ammunitions. So you're actually going to just want only one character usually on your team who just uses big guns. Give him a high coordination so he can do whatever he like with that weapon and get the most out of it. And also a high awareness so he's actually hitting, and a high strength, usually 4 and then going up to 5 or 6, so he can carry those weapons. Now, as I said, my big gun character has a very low speed stat, only 1, but there's a perk in the big gun skill tree called Move Up, which lets you essentially at the first turn move faster and further, so you can get in position and just sit there and mow everyone down during the fight. Next up, we have Brawling. Brawling is a very interesting perk. It's really, really bad at the start of the game, and you'll be like, why have I chosen this? However, as you level up at the end of the game, it's like the most overpowered and fun thing ever. Now, each Brawling attack costs 2 action points, and at the end of the game, you actually get a perk that reduces it down to 1 action point, which is just like ridiculously overpowered. Now, the brawling system is very different compared to all the other melee weapons. Each time that you hit the same enemy, you build 1 stack on them. These stacks increase your chance increasingly to critical hit them. So a high intelligence with brawling means that you'll crit like crazy, and those crits will do mega damage. Charisma will also help you with fast leveling, so brawling actually becomes powerful faster, and also increase your strike rate as well. And finally, coordination lets you get in as many punches as possible. And later on, you'll get energy weapon fists that ignore the enemy's armor, so it's just ludicrous the damage you can do. And then we have melee combat, which covers bladed weapons, which are your high damage against no armor, and then blunt weapons, which are high damage against people with armor because they have more penetration. So you can combine both of them, and they have different perks for each one of them. Now, personally, my melee character has a very low awareness skill, and instead I invest into melee combat so it increases his chance to hit, and he's not wasting points in awareness instead. Now, small arms covers pump shotguns, automatic shotguns, pistols, and semi-automatic pistols as well, and it affects their chance to hit. Now, pistols are really fun in the game. They have a very short range. However, having a pistol and shotgun, you can really just shoot away and get those critical hits with a high luck skill. So I do quite enjoy having 1 or 2 pistol users, even as just a sidearm backup. Next, we have sniper rifles. Now, sniper rifles are pretty amazing. They have some very good perks that you have access to, and you also do a lot of damage and have a high penetration. So essentially, I'd recommend a high awareness skill, specifically good intelligence for those really high damage critical hits, and also a decent luck skill as well. You can leave your coordination at 4, and that's pretty much going to do you for most of the game. Next, we have general skills. Now, explosives also dictates how much damage you're going to do with explosive weaponry like rocket launchers, and if you can actually disarm landmines that you find throughout the game, which gives you access to, if you disarm certain things, you can get a perk that gives you grenades when you disarm them. So explosives, it's required, I would say, on one character for sure. The next thing we have is weird science. Now, this is an interesting one because there are certain weapons in the game that are purely based off your weird science skill. So you can have one character who doesn't have any combat skills but has a high weird science skill, which then means he can use those science based weapons, which I'd recommend doing because, like, I'd say like early mid game, you're going to get access to those weapons and you're going to appreciate them, especially if you combine it with the automatic weapons as well. Some weird science weapons require like free automatic weapon skill and then free weird science skill, and you can have like energy based damage, and energy weapons in this game ignore enemies' armor, so they're just so powerful. There's also skill checks in the game that are going to be dictated by your weird science skill. Obviously it increases the damage you do with energy weapons as well. That also stacks with your awareness with range weapons, so bear that in mind. It also gives you bonus to fire damage and cold damage too. So weird science, very good skill. Next up we have Animal Whisperer. Now this is one of those sort of really fun skills that lets you recruit animals into your party. At the start of the game, it's actually quite good to have, I think it's like free Animal Whisperer skill, because then you can recruit this specific cat into your party near the start of the game. Now the higher your Animal Whisperer skill, the more damage your animal companion will deal. And you can also recruit like larger animals like bears, cows and whatnot into your party. My sniper has an Animal Whisperer skill of like 2 early on, and she recruited a cat into the party, and the animal that you recruit also gives you a buff. So cats gives you a plus 5% chance to critical hit, which is really, really good. And each animal gives you a different buff. I'm not going to go over them all, but essentially Animal Whisperer is a really good thing to have on one person, because that cat also acts as a decoy and runs into combat and hits things, compared to them shooting at the rest of my party. And animals are very easy to come by as well. There's also fun little flavor things you can do with this perk too, and some of the perks are actually really good. Next we have First Aid. Now First Aid, really important. One of my guys, who's also my leader with a high intelligence skill, has a high First Aid skill because it increases his healing item effectiveness and increases the amount of health he revives people on, and also it gives you the ability to use harder to use healing items too. And also, this is really important, there's a lot of times in the game, more often than any other skill, where if you interact with bodies that you'll find throughout the game and other things, having a high First Aid skill will allow you to figure out how they died. And there's a lot of unwritten things you'll come across in the game where you'll be like, oh my god, that person killed that body because I can see the same thing happening over here, and when I inspected that corpse, it had a similar cause of death. And it's kind of like an unwritten sort of thing that will give you a backstory into if you should trust that person or not, and they might be quite dark, as we found in our playthrough, you know? So First Aid is just incredibly cool skill, and you have great perks as well. One of the best skills in the game for sure. Then we have exploration skills. So armor modding and weapon modding is a thing. It basically allows you to install weapon and armor mods that increase your armor's rating and efficiency, which becomes more and more beneficial later on in the game for sure. Early in the game it doesn't have too much of an effect, though it's still very useful. Obviously when you're designing your team, you're going to want like each character to be sort of specced into certain roles. Armor modding and weapon modding is very useful. However, I believe you come across a follower very early called Lucia who has a decent weapon modding skill. So you could just have her in your party the whole time. She's also a pistol user as well, and she has a high barter skill too. So those are those two things covered if you keep her in your party as, you know, your 5th and 6th companions. Next we have lockpicking. Now I have my sniper in the party who has a high luck skill and a high lockpicking skill. Lockpicking has been the best skill ever. It just gives you access to everything in the game, looting loads of containers, getting into places maybe you shouldn't be, and just robbing them essentially. So I have a very high lockpicking skill, and I've put as many points as I can into that so I can get all the loot I can. And combined with a high luck skill, you get even better loot, more money, and so on. Then we have nerd stuff. This is your ability to hack computers and robots. So I do have one character who has a decent nerd skill. We haven't come across a lot of robots yet, but there has been terminals to hack, extra information to gain, where it's been a lot of use to us. So having a character spec'd into that is really useful. Especially it's allowed me to avoid certain confrontations a few times by hacking terminals and getting leverage over certain people in the game. I don't want to spoil anything for you though. Mechanics is amazing. Again, really good. So this increases your damage versus robots, vehicles and synths. It also allows you to fix generators and machines, your car for example, and it increases your repair kit efficiency. So you have your own car in the Wasteland that you can drive around in, and being able to repair it effectively and having one guy who can do that is really good. So my big gun guy is spec'd into mechanics. It also dictates your ability to use robots on your own team. So you have like one-use turrets or robots that just mess people's crap up that you can deploy. And having a guy that can actually do that in your team, for me it's my big gun guy, is really, really useful. And obviously there's loads of things that can be repaired and require skill checks in mechanics to use as well. So mechanics, invaluable. Survival, okay, so survival I've not used at all. I just think it's not worth it. I've not spec'd into the skill at all. So damage versus animals increases to 24%, maximum of 30%, and damage versus mutants increases as well. Now that's for that specific person. It's not shared in your party at all. However, it does allow you to avoid world map encounters. Sometimes that's really good. Other times you kind of want those encounters because some of them are really cool and interesting and you can loot stuff and, you know, spend stuff, get experience. So I want world encounters to happen. So me, no survival skill whatsoever. Apart from Lucia, I think it has like 1 or 2 survival, but I've not increased it at all. Toaster repair. This is something no one understands. So if you've not played Wasteland games before, toasters are things you come across. I think I've come across maybe 3 or so in the opening 10 hours in like the starting areas of the game. And basically if you repair that toaster, you will get items inside it that are way above your level that you can use, you know? It's not just a loot chest, it's like a buffed boss chest, you know? These toasters require a certain skill to be repaired. Some of the perks are quite funny and enjoyable, especially the toaster one at the max level, but they're not that amazing. So personally, I've sacked off the toaster repair skill completely. It's decent, don't get me wrong, and some of the best stuff in the game is found in there and required, like some quest items and stuff you can read into, but I don't know what they are yet, so I've just not bothered investing into it at all. Social skills, right, so we already covered leadership a little bit, but essentially it gives you a bonus for your allies to hit who are near you. So I have one leader in my party who has a huge charisma range, and he just gives everyone a bonus to hit. Next we have barter. Barter is really good for one character. It increases the sell value and reduces the buy cost ever so slightly. So obviously as you get on later in the game, or even you find that 2,500 golden bar, you get an increased sale boost as well. If you're also friendly with merchants, you also get like a 20% discount as well at their shops. But the buy cost, you know, doesn't really, minus 10%, but maxing out an entire skill isn't that great, so that doesn't press me that much. However, the sell value is really good, and you do find a lot of junk that can be sold. You're going to be selling stuff, so obviously one person in your party with a decent barter skill will give you more money. Pretty simple. Now we have hard ass and kiss ass. So these are basically your speech skills. And the only benefit, because they have no perks at all tied to them, that you're going to get is when you're having conversations. Now, trust me, there are loads of opportunities where these come up. One of the people you meet early on in the game, Marshal Quan, I believe his name is, first companion you have to your party, has a kiss ass skill of 4. I recommend just carry on investing it, and if he stays in your party, then you'll have someone with a maxed out kiss ass. Hard ass I've not invested into at all. It does come up, trust me, especially avoiding confrontations. Very possible thing to do. So essentially those are every single skill in the game, how they work, how valuable they are, and what you're going to want to spec into. So there you have it, guys. That is the complete overview of the best quirks, skills, backstories, and how to build your character. Hopefully you've got a good idea now. But if you really want like proper character builds, then I recommend watching part 1 of my playthrough. At the start, I build my character and we have a heavy weapons guy and a leadership guy, and you know, so far playing through the game, I mean, they've been invaluable. And I've also been min-maxing my characters as well as I play through to be super efficient. And then if you watch the second episode, I make another 2 characters. One's a sniper and one's a melee person. So if you want to see how to build those characters, just watch the second episode as well. But otherwise, the game is rather forgiving, to be honest with you. I mean, you can create like an average character and just choose whatever you want to spec into as you play the game, and it's very accessible in that sense. It's not like Wastelands 1 and 2 where I felt like, you know, sometimes you were just screwed if you messed up your character creation and you were like, oh man, I just got to restart. This game's very accessible for sure. However, the way I've min-maxed my party, which is why I recommend you checking out those videos linked below, is very much allowing me to play through the game and access absolutely everything I come across. And I've completed all the quests so far in like very amicable ways. So if you're that kind of player like me, a completionist, check out those builds because they'll help you out too. But guys, if you found this video helpful, please, for me, leave a like. If you've got time, comment below. Just let me know, because sometimes I make this stuff and I don't know how many people get to the end and find it helpful. Just let me know, please. But guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you found it interesting, because I'm going to have loads more Wasteland quick tips videos and my playthrough coming out obviously tomorrow. It's probably already out for many of you watching who want to check it out. But guys, thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Have a great day and goodbye.